13 changes to the Springbok team. I'm joined by the Welsh and Lions icon, Scott Gibbs. He's been to South Africa in 97. He destroyed us with the Lions. Didn't have so much luck with Wales. Big call? Change the complexion of the series?
Yeah, I think so, Mark. I mean, listen, this is a Boks test team, but it feels to the naked eye like a Boks all-star team. With rewarding all of that great talent that we've seen through the URC, bringing some experience back in the fold with Steph Dutoy and Marcel Coetzee, who looks, like he was 20 years ago. So I dare say, if anything, Wayne Pivac and the team might be scratching their heads like, how the hell do we prepare for this now?
I mean, they would have analysed that first test and thought they were coming up against the world champion, the 2019 squad. There's a sprinkling of those guys in the squad. Peter Steph Dutoy comes back from injury. Eben Etzebeth is still there, so two giants of the game in that pack. And then a Marcel Coetzee, as you said, who's come back in, and Evan Rus, the URC player of the tournament. He was fantastic for the DHL Stormers. And then we look again what's on that bench. A really exciting bench. I just think a huge up to Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus that they've embraced having 42 players in the squad, and they've played them regardless of the results or the way the game played out in Pretoria a week ago.
Again, shows you composure and no reaction from how potentially disappointing that opening 20 was for the Boks on Saturday. Obviously, they're never a side that will capitulate and not finish the game much stronger. But to throw this kind of curveball now into this 3-test series just gives a homage and a nod to what's ahead. Rugby Championship, 14 games before the World Cup, all that array of talent. Need to be sure about all of these appointments. Lovely to see Andre Esterhuizen get some game time. Just for those who are not so familiar, the last 3 or 4 years he's been irrepressible in the Harlequins jersey. 6'4", 18 stone. One of the most difficult guys to contain and to get to the ground very early. So when you look at that back line, anchored with Pollard coming back from a little bit of a rest, given the championship win in the French top 14, 10 and 12 need to have a great performance. And then you got the Fassi, Gallant, guys that have been rewarded by their out and out ability to create havoc, not only in attack but in defence. So all in all, it's a very dynamic Boks all-star team. But the thing is, it has to be a collective. The fact is, they've got 3 or 4 days now to prepare for Saturday. They obviously want to put a good show on. There is no doubt about that. Turn up the volume, turn up the frequency, turn up the heat, turn up the hiss to kind of nail this series in Bloemfontein. But not without prudence. You still have to do the basics very well, and there will be a lot of people on that team maybe trying a little too hard. So you've got to balance that with a little bit of game understanding, with great tempo. But certainly a shock from a selection perspective, and I'm sure the wider world and the press will be looking at it and going, wow, this just illustrates the exact amount of depth that this great nation has from a rugby perspective.
If you look at the Boks 2019, how they won the World Cup, how they played against the Lions series, how they took it into the Rugby Championship, and even the end of year tour where they had mixed results, very much a similar approach in Pretoria, even though the execution was very poor. But you look at the dynamic of this squad, you're looking more Stormers, Bulls, Sharks, and the way they played in the URC. They used the width of the field, they had fantastic ball runners. So if you Pivac, you would be sitting back and thinking, that 9 can't play that kind of game, if Haf de Klerk. He's got to play a different game. That back 3 isn't a Willie LaRue at the back, a Colby and a Mapimpi. It's the back row dynamic is completely different. The insurance policy is, again, that super bomb squad bench that they've got. But it is a game where it could really be this Carnival Barbarians type game. Is that what Wales would have wanted or not?
I don't think so. I think intrinsically they would have wanted exactly what they came here to appreciate, which was, a very structured, formidable opposition that's easy to analyse from an analytical perspective. Good line kick chase. Then you have to be very strong on defending that line out drive. Listen, faff around the corner, bring in players on. Now maybe the temperance is to move away from the chop tackle, which was so successful and frustrating the Boks last weekend, and maybe raise the height of that, because you got someone like Kutsia and Steph Toy that brings enormous venom into that kind of carrying game. That said, I think that will be the hallmark of how this side adopts this kind of strategy, that we will see still, a very strong kicking game. But the fact is there's so much talent with so much energy that they'll want to be on show. Now you just got to balance that with timing your runs and getting that right. Because if the collective is not there, it could potentially be a little messy. And no one wants to see that. Certainly the Boks are familiar with the barbarians type football. But that said, we're in a new era. This is maybe the new normal, with the way that the Sharks are playing, the way that we've seen the Stormers. So now is the time to maybe see that permeate into a new type of Bok dynamic.
If you look at the squad setup, the one thing that pleases me the most is he hasn't waited till it's 2-0 up in a series and played them in the third test, and people say, bit of a dead rubber. They were willing to take the risk, as they did in 2018. They won the series against England. They made 10 changes for the third test in Cape Town. It rained all day. Cipriani had a decent game. The Boks lost 25-10, and some of those players never played again. He's saying to this group, you can go out and win the series on Saturday, and we trust you to win the series, and you're pretty much going to play exactly the same team, because Wales aren't expected to make many changes. You're going to play the exact same team that the World Cup winning side needed 82 minutes to beat. Show us how good you are. I think it's an all-win situation for him, because if they don't go over the line, they've still got the decider in Cape Town to kind of look at the best 23 from the 42 and back themselves to win it in front of 50,000 at the DHL Stadium. Your thoughts on that?
I think there is. I think they're very cognizant. I think the manager is very cognizant of the fact is that we have been starved. The population and the supporters here in South Africa have been starved of real live rugby, the ability to go and see real live rugby. We saw a cracker at Pretoria on the weekend. This has all the hallmarks again of a different type of test match in Bloemfontein, and then to cap it off at a full stadium at the DHL in Cape Town, just shows you how in tune they are with their supporter base. Because I think when most people see this, they will be totally surprised by the selection, but buoyed the fact that there's more exposure. We get to see more talent. We get to see developing talent given opportunity. With the roadmap ahead, 14 games away from France and Rugby World Cup 23, the holders trying to keep hold of the Webb Ellis Cup. This is exactly how you do it. Experiment. Let's see exactly what type of DNA we are. Make the wider group even more resolute than we've seen, because there's nothing wrong with the way that the Bok team play football. Much maligned globally about the way that they get a stranglehold on the game, but I think this gives them another contingency, another dynamic to what is supporting the homegrown talent that is just incredible to watch, and we've seen that in the last 6 weeks of the URC. So this is just testament to all of those great athletes that have put their hand up, they get in the exposure, they get in the game time. Don't fuck it up.
Well, exactly. But if you look at how the Stormers finished, how the Bulls finished, the Bulls going to Dublin, beating Leinster, a great quarterfinal against the Sharks. What I'm loving about this, it's not ignoring the URC and saying it's a feeder competition, you've got to be playing overseas. It's saying we're picking a team largely out of that's good enough to beat a very good Welsh side.
It's recognition, Mark. It's recognition, because as you said, during the COVID period where it was just another rendition of the Curry Cup, everybody got a little bit bored and stale with watching football. This is just the tonic, exactly what South African rugby needs, and that selection today epitomises what this Bok team deserves.
Well, I mean, you said it earlier, though. The big factor is, can they gel as a unit on the day? Because it has got a Barbarians feel about it. If you look at the back line, that back three individually, Fassi, Gelant and Curtly Arendse, who had a very good final, wonderful talent from the Bulls, Western Cape boy as well. Fassi, people felt he was underutilized with the Boks. They played him on the wing again. Wonderful individual talents. How do they come together? And also a big emphasis on Pollard. He was played minimally in Montpellier when he announced he was going to Leicester, but for Pollard, give the captaincy to him, let him control the game, and with the brute next to him at 12. I mean, he's been chomping at the bit, as you said, Andre Esterhuizen, for the last 3 years. Harlequins, one of their stars of the year, Premiership Player of the Year. Dearlandy's a world-class. He is the number one. But if he goes down, we've got another option, and we've also got Damian Willemse sitting on the bench who can play 10, 12 and 15.
Yeah, this is all about depth, complexity, and contingency plans if the very worst happens to some of our great, some of the Boks great players. Because it's still a long way out and things can happen. I think the fact is that all in all, this just demonstrates the depth of the talent here, and for a long time, I think you would agree there's a lot of good players that have just been overlooked because just the situation wasn't right, or maybe they didn't get the exposure, and certainly the rugby exposure here over the last years has diminished with the Super Rugby, and people started to look elsewhere to apply their trade. So I think he's kind of brought all that together. I mean, on Pollard, yes, he's a conductor this weekend, and he has to make sure that there's a real pulse and pace to this game. All of them will be familiar with all of the great traits that Boks Rugby represents. But the fact is, because there's so much stardust on this team, we're going to see something different. And I think that's what poses the biggest question from a Welsh perspective, is like when they look at this side and they go, wow, I didn't expect to see him, they'll be familiar with Marvin Orri, but Marvin Orri has suddenly found some form. So it is, I think this makes for a more delicious test match than I would have ever imagined.
Don't you think it really put such spice into the test series as well? We had this thriller in Pretoria. I mean, Wales were outstanding in terms of their grit, their ticker. It's certainly one that got away. That was a lost opportunity. But in a way, they've been given another crack at making history in South Africa. And he's entrusted a very new-look side to say, do you want to be the first team to ever lose to Wales in South Africa? So they've given the series spice.
Exactly. When we're talking about the spice, whether it's the Cape Malay curry or we're talking about the papaiti, there's a lot at stake on the weekend. And like I joked earlier about, Pivac scratching his, well, how do we prepare against it? They'll know exactly who they're up against, because they will be saying, we get our discipline right. We improve our game by another 10%. Yes, we're a little bit banged up, but we showed, as you say, enormous character on Saturday for a thrilling test match in Pretoria. So what happens is that that they're going to come thick and hard. So then you're just going to mediate how you get into that defensive orientation to either take them down that source and try and slow that ball to again frustrate their ability to create quick ball, because this side remonstrates. The fact is that there's so much width and pace outside on that 15 5-meter channel on the perimeter. You have to feed the speed, and both sides will want to be seeing more of that, because they've underutilized all that talent on that periphery. But as we all know, it's all made up of how you win that game down the middle 30 channel, and that's what's going to be the biggest challenge for Wales on Saturday, is if they get their defence absolutely right, coupled with the discipline, and also making sure that if you stay ahead, if you get ahead, you've got to stay ahead. And the dynamic will be different from an atmospheric perspective in Bloemfontein, a little bit higher in altitude. So again, it's still going to be an enormous ask for Wales to knock this one over. But I think there could be some dysfunction in the fact that this is so littered with talent. And maybe
and
that
for
would be
its time together, and a lot of test.
Well, that's right. Because
very inexperienced in many positions as well. Exciting talent, but you've got a Gelant who'll be playing for the first time in a while. Fassie's hardly played a handful of tests. You've got Kirkley Arendse making his debut. Esterhuizen coming back, been in the wilderness for a while. Jesse Kriel, big question mark over. He's been in the squad for an extended period of time, and was his peak in 2015, 7 years ago. He's been a great team player. But you feel he's got to do something special to remain in that group of 40.
Well, and unfortunately, Jesse's had a lot of opportunity, and sometimes I feel he tries too hard rather than just wait for the moment to kind of make an imprint into the game. And as you said, this week now, from a preparatory perspective, is that the guys who have got to the Bloemfontein, the management have had this clear strategy on who we're going to pick. But the fact is that, you've got 2.5 days of preparatory. They're probably almost just running through the system and so on and so forth, underpinned by, as we know, very strong carrying game, great territorial game. And they know they're going to have to pick up the tempo because there's a lot of ring rustiness last week, and we expect more. The Boks expect more. The paying public expect more. So this is a delicious kind of matchup on Saturday. That as you said, favours Wales in the fact is that they are more solid, more settled. They have taken enormous comfort, and I would say even more belief that they can knock the Boks off. But the fact is, this is an unknown, and that scares me.
I think it scares a lot of South Africans. If I just looked at the social media reaction, they were like, "What a team! Oh no, what a team!" That kind of thing. There is this acknowledgement that, wow, finally some of these fringe players are being given a chance in a test match that has relevance.
That's right.
It's not a dead rubber. It's not the end of the year tour. It's a one-off test. This has relevance because there's history to be made on both sides, and it makes for a wonderful, wonderful build-up. The rest of the week, we'll be back on Thursday with the Money Man and SARugby Magazine's editor, Zellum Nell. We'll be chatting about the Welsh team there. We don't expect too many changes, but we'll get your thoughts for that on Thursday. But 13 changes to the Boks side. A hugely exciting side selected by Jacques Nienhaber and Rassie Erasmus. 1-0 up in the series game of Bloemfontein. Wales have never won in 11 tests in South Africa. They were 2-3 minutes away from doing it in Pretoria. They lost in Nelspruit a few years ago, 31-30. They will be smelling history, but also a little bit of fear.